Honorable Minister of Finance, Deputy Ministers, the Chairman of the Stock Exchange, Chairman of the Securities Commission, Governor of the Bank, Chairman of BOI, distinguished guests, and friends. First of all, I must thank you for inviting me to the 30th anniversary of the establishment of the Colombo Stock Exchange. This was an important measure in the opening up, in establishing a market economy by the J.R. Jayawardena regime. I am sorry that the then Minister of Finance, Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, is unable to be present here. He was the minister responsible and paid personal attention during his tenure of office. I think I am the last member of that cabinet to still be in politics. Today, at 10 p.m. GMT, the House of Commons will decide whether they are going to bomb Syria or not. Yesterday, day before, the German cabinet decided to commit its armed resources to the expanding war against ISIS in the Middle East. The rest of Europe has fallen in line, includes the Western nations, Russia, and of course the USA, brings in China. Again, yesterday, the IMF decided to include the Chinese currency in the SDR basket of currencies. These are two important developments that are going to impact on us and the rest of the world economically. You have to remember that there's going to be an unpredictable world scenario, both politically and economically, which will determine the fate of the global economy and ours also in the coming year. If you look at the World Economic Outlook global growth rate projections, in July, they forecast 3.3% growth. But in the October, it's come down to 3.1%. Then there's been a reduction of 0.2% in the estimates of the World Economic Outlook. We had to expect declining commodity prices, and that has an impact on the Sri Lankan economy. And there will be reduced flows to the emerging capital markets. We have also got to remember that there will be pressure on our currencies and there will be increased financial market volatility as far as we are concerned. There's going to be slower growth in the emerging market and with increased risk. Similarly, there will be an improvement in the established markets. Now we have to think of the impact that's going to have on our economy. While the improvement of the established markets were predicted a month back, we again had to remember what the unfolding scenario will say, even of the established economies. So this is where we are. As far as our stock exchange is concerned, after we established in 1985, I was the minister when we got the next round in charge of economic activity, when we had the next round of reforms in 1990. We sent up the share market. Again in 2002, after the ceasefire agreement, and of course, finally, at the end of the war, you saw another boost in the market. But that was the background of the 2008 global financial crisis, and we have to remember there was the interest rates, the federal interest rates came down, no longer attractive to invest in the West, and Chinese credit was available. Now it's going to change. In 2016, the federal interest rates have to increase. That is one sure sign that President Obama wants to show the American electorate that under his administration, the economy has improved and the interest rates are gradually crawling back to normal. So don't expect it to stay low. It won't. It will be decided politically. Otherwise, he'll be open to attack. Then the free availability of Chinese credit has come to an end. The burst of the Chinese equity bubble and the adverse impact on the exchange rate meant that there's going to be slower growth in China, but it's rebalancing. And what we have to expect is a larger amount of Chinese direct investment in our economies for China to expand and for our own economy to expand. What have we got to do? First, we have to maintain our momentum and ensure there's, whatever happens, there's a 6.5% growth rate for next year. There may be some unforeseen circumstances, in which case not only our economies, but the whole of most of the emerging market economies will have to take a downward plunge. But that's not going to be on macroeconomic policies. It's going to be something outside that. But then from 6.5%, whatever be the problems we face, we have to go to a higher growth rate. We have to achieve 8%, and we have to ensure sometimes we can get 9%. Now, these are difficult tasks, but not impossible. We have to do this because by 2030, we must become a high-income country. So all our efforts have to be mobilized to achieve this demand, this goal. What did we do with the mini budget of 2015? We increased the aggregate demand so that there was a surplus in the hands of the ordinary people. It is already seen, of course, in the increase in demand for goods, of consumer goods. But there is still a lot of available and untapped consumable income in our economy, especially in the balance sheets of some of our companies. Now, we have to find ways and means to ensure that all this is directed towards investments. We will have structural reforms to facilitate investment and growth. We want to ensure an expanding and a strong middle class in this country. So it's in this background that the Minister of Finance had to present the budget. As I said, a lot of what happens next year is not in his hands, nor in our hands. It's going to be hands in actors outside this country. You have to remember that. I was reading the report by Modi, the Moody's report, where they were talking of a high deficit. Yes, we will have a high deficit initially. But as investments comes, as revenue grows and bring more and more people into the net and more incomes into the net, then we should be able to achieve our target of a 3.5% deficit in 2020. That's the way to go. Our first focus is on the state enterprise, and we will ensure that there's better performance by the state enterprises in the coming few years. We are keeping the 2020 deficit target, so the state enterprises have to make a contribution to the national economy and to the state revenue. We are also paying attention to the fundamentals of a highly competitive social market economy, which means there has to be free education, there has to be free health, there has to be subsidized housing available for the people, including a large number of executives who now have to travel 1.5 hours to come to Colombo and 1.5 hours to go back. Just imagine the savings on time and the impact on all our businesses if we can have high-rise middle-class housing closer to Colombo and a better traffic system in the city. Just look at that impact. What are we going to do? Well, we are looking in terms of developing the many sectors we have mentioned, but especially I must mention the megapolis, which is important to make Sri Lanka, Colombo into a megapolis. And hopefully, if the port city project gets on the way, I think there will be some form of landfill there, then that could have the makings of a special business and financial district, which will be a unique one in South Asia at the Treasury, and we have discussed. So to carry all this out, we have the Economic Management Committee of the Cabinet, which has many senior members from both parties and those involved in economic matters. I have the Policy Development Office, which is responsible for economic policy, domestic policy, and global policy, headed by Charita Ratwatta, and the Institute of Policy Studies, which will be headed by Razin Sali. We have Agency for Development and International Trade Agency, both of which will also start functioning by early next year. We will have the Sri Lanka Economic Forum early next year, but it also brings in the Harvard University Center for International Development, will help us along. There will be Ricardo Hausman, I think, will be visiting Sri Lanka in some time in December before the forum starts with George Soros. I've also, as I've mentioned in Parliament, we've also asked the IMF to help us to rewrite the tax code and the need to have a standby agreement. So this is in short the economic scenario and the budget that we have. The budget we have gone through, the second one from Mr. Ravi Karnayaka, is very much like the Sinhala New Year. Firstly, at the end of the old year, you give a bonus and people start spending. That was what the mini budget is for. Then you have a Nonagate, when you get everything ready. That's what we are now. And then in 2016, we'll have the actual New Year that will take place. We have to move away from the old economy into new, but there are spending that we have to carry. And I must tell you that we still don't know how much of debt has been left behind our predecessors. So we may have to bring a contingencies liability bill to Parliament sometime next year, and the Parliament will make recommendations for Parliament to decide how the additional revenues are being raised to pay for these expenditures. So as far as the stock exchange is concerned, the stock market is concerned, the securities are concerned, we require an efficient and transparent stock market. And to help this, we are prepared to have some of the public sector entities being listed next year to ensure that there's growth. And then we again will be rebalancing out of the funds that originally came here in emerging markets, which will go back into the Western markets. But to do so, we have to address a few issues. One is, I wanted to see an expansion in the shareholding in this country. The middle class must have a stake, and I am not satisfied. Maybe in the last 5-6 years, the stock exchange has in fact led to a concentration of ownership. Then there are questions of integrity, which we can't run away from, and which we have to address. We have a chairman of the Securities and Exchange, which I could describe in 2 words, born again. But I think the best is that for us to address the concerns that have been expressed in an open letter on the 25th of October this year by Chandra Jayaratna on the conflict of interest in the Securities and Stock Exchange. These are not things we can run away with. These are issues on which we discussed during the, certainly during the elections, and most probably Parliament will go into when the oversight committees are established in January next year. What I want is for the Colombo Stock Exchange to grow, and as the chairman says, become the center for South Asia, for which we will bring in laws which have not been seen in South Asia earlier, together with the Exchange Management Act, together with territorial taxation, and some of the other measures, bold measures which we want to take. But it also requires complete confidence in the stock exchange. So it's best that you address these yourselves, and I myself will be hoping to meet all of you all in the coming month or so before we start announcing what will be the specific measures that we plan to take. So I don't want to take any more of your time. I think the Minister of Finance now has to be in Parliament. This is the last day of the second reading of the budget. So thanking you again. Let's all hope that there will be a strong stock market reflecting a strong economy which we are pledged to create. Thank you.